Okay guys, as promised, I told you I would be making a recording for your latest lesson within Unit 2 called Characteristics of Life. And as I had asked you the question in class, what does it mean to be alive? And many of you wrote down, you have a pulse. There's lots of things that you guys had said, but biologists are very specific about what actually characterizes life, so we're going to go into it. So for starters, we have what biology is actually all about. All of you guys, of course, are in biology, and sometimes it seems like, well, why do I have to learn this? What on earth is biology, and why should I care? Well, to be very honest with you, biology is, in essence, the study of life. If you were to take the word biology and break it down into its suffixes and prefixes, bio simply means life, just life, and logi in Latin means the study of. So biology, almost directly translated, is the study of life. And we will be doing this throughout the entire year. We will be studying life in all of its different types of forms, and what it means to be alive, and how you know something is alive. So that's my question for you today. How do we characterize this life? So the way that I had characterized life, I did it based on 7 characteristics, which are pretty standard all throughout science and biology. And I made a little mnemonic for you guys who are able to remember things easier through mnemonics. Many of you know that I have my classroom is the Alice in Wonderland theme, and so, of course, being the teacher, I am the Queen of Hearts. And so I made a mnemonic to remember the 7 characteristics of life by saying, when in doubt, consult the Queen of Hearts. And so I have the O in parentheses because if you do of hearts, that's actually 8 characters instead of 7, and so I kind of just dropped the F and just will say it's O hearts. So let's go into what is the first one. And so if you are at home and you have not actually made this, you're going to have to either create a foldable, or if you have the foldable and you just need to kind of finish filling it out, then this is the time that you would do it. All of your tabs on your foldable will be saying one of these specific characteristics that I'm about to reveal to you one by one. And then we're going to go into detail on what they are, and you're going to actually put this information on the top part of each of your tabs, of each of your flaps, so that when you lift up each flap, you get to see all the details of what each characteristic is. So let's go ahead and start with the top one. So the first tab that you should have is organizes themselves into functional units. So pretty much anything in life will organize itself into some sort of cellular unit or functional multicellular unit. The next one down is heredity. So everything that is alive has some sort of genetic material, i.e. like DNA. And when I say i.e., it simply means just example DNA. So we all have heredity. We all use energy. So the E on my O hearts, the E stands for energy use, or this lovely buzzword we all pass around called metabolism, which we'll get into detail of what exactly that is. The next one, the A, stands for adjusts and responds to changes in the environment. So as living creatures, we are constantly responding to our environment, and we are adjusting to the changes that we see. The R stands for reproduces or reproduction, which of course is pretty self-explanatory, but if you're not sure what it means to reproduce, of course we'll go into that as well. The T will stand for the tiniest unit of life. This is aka cells. So the tiniest unit of life as we know it is a cell that is able to still have all of the characteristics of life within it. And finally, the S. So the S stands for size increase in development, or if you wanted to say like growth. Size increase in development, which means growth. So let's go ahead and go into each one individually in detail. So let's talk about what it means to organize oneself into a unit. So all of life falls into this levels of organization, right? So I have the picture up here. We are all composed of atoms, of course, right? So atoms is the smallest thing that we are broken down into. If you wanted to go smaller than atoms, of course you could go like subatomic particles like electrons, protons, neutrons. But we're not going to do that. For intensive purposes, we're going to say our smallest particle is an atom. And atoms, of course, come together to make molecules. So if I have some hydrogen atoms or some oxygen atoms, I'm going to come together, these atoms will come together to make a molecule like, say, water, H2O. And so later these molecules, they can come together to form bigger functional units such as organelles, which you guys of course will learn all about when you do your cell models. But organelles are pretty much like the mini organs within a cell, okay? So we call these organelles. And then finally we get truncated at the cellular level, right? So the organelles, they come together and they can stop at the cellular level. And one example of an organism that's still classified as alive, but its level of organization stops at the cell, is like bacteria, right? So bacteria is single cellular, and so they stop at the cells. That's their level of organization. However, if you're multicellular like us, you're going to continue on, and your cells will come together to make tissues in your body, right? It'll make muscular tissue, these types of tissues, which will, of course, form our organs, right? So we'll form our muscles, our heart, our brain. These are all of our organs, and then organs can work together for a common function called the organ system. So a good example of this would be like the digestive system, where we have our small intestines are working together with our pancreas, and all of these will come together to make our digestive system. And then, of course, finally, the big shebang, all of it comes together in one gigantic functional unit, like us, if you're talking about a human, and of course that we would call that an organism. So the next one down, of course, is heredity. And so heredity really just boils down to the passing of genes, right? So genes are like little packets of hereditary information, okay? And genes are composed of the DNA that we have in our cells. So DNA is composed into packets, which are genes, which we pass from parents to their children. And so I went ahead and showed a picture of my family. As you can see, I look very much like my parents. My sister looks very much like my parents. We resemble our parents, and this is because of these genes, right? My parents have passed down their genes to me and my sister, and so that's what I mean by hereditary traits. Sometimes genes can accumulate mutations because there's mutations that happen within the DNA, and this can also be passed down generation to generation. It can result in sometimes deformities and other things like that, but it's not as common as just regular passing of the genes. So the next one we'll call is energy and metabolism. So most of you guys know that you have to eat to live, right? So we all consume food because we want to get as much energy out of our food as we can to continue on our day. And the reason why we have this consumption of food to get this energy is in order to grow and develop, repair any damages to cells that we may have had, and even reproduce. So I have a picture here of my little otter, and he's crunching on his crab to get the energy that he needs to sustain his life. So let's break it down what exactly metabolism is. And metabolism is a buzzword that a lot of students like to use. Like they'll say, oh, well, he has a high metabolism, so he's really skinny, or their metabolism isn't so fast. And so, to be honest with you, the only thing that metabolism is for the purposes of this class is a chemical reaction that occurs within the organism. And metabolism is actually made up of two parts. You have what we call anabolism and catabolism. And both these parts together make metabolism overall. And I have a picture up here, and I know it's very scary for some of you, so don't worry. We're going to actually break down the picture. But this is, in essence, what metabolism looks like. So let's start out with the top one. Anabolism, when we say anabolism, we are simply meaning the process of building up substances from smaller parts. So I gave the example of a house. Most of you guys have seen construction somewhere at some point in your life of somebody building up a house or a business or whatever. And it's these building up parts, right? We take our sheetrock, we take our lumber, we build it up into this complex substance from our smaller, simpler parts. And that's pretty much what your body does when it is trying to build up cells or cellular parts. It uses anabolism to build up these components. On the same time, just because we build up stuff, sometimes we need to break stuff down. So the process of actually breaking stuff down we call catabolism, all right? So a perfect example of catabolism that we have in our body is digestion, right? So we all consume food, and as it goes through our system, we kind of excrete out what we don't want, and it always looks different going in than it does when it comes out, and that's because we broke it down. We broke down the food, we took out what we wanted, and then we just excreted the rest out. And so again, breaking down is just taking something that's complex and breaking it into its smaller parts, kind of like my house example, except this time, instead of building my house, I'm going to demolish my house. So the next on our tabs is adjusts in response to the environment. So as organisms, we are constantly adjusting to our environment. Our eyes are always adjusting to the light within the room. Our pupils will either get really small if it's really a bright light, or it'll get bigger if they're trying to take more light in so that we can see more in the dark. Temperature, same way. When you guys go outside and it's really hot, all of a sudden you'll start to feel like you're sweating. So your body is adjusting to that temperature change, right? Odor, the same thing. All of these are perfect examples of how we adjust or react to these different stimulation or stimuli. And so I give an example like a plant. A plant's leaves and stems will grow towards the light because it's just trying to take more of the light in. It's adjusting to its environment. With this adjustment and what happens, there is a very fancy word that biologists like to use, and it is called homeostasis. So homeostasis really just boils down to a stable state of conditions that the organism will have in order to maintain its body and combat more or less the changes in environment. And so I give the example of like body temperature. Just because it's 104 degrees outside doesn't mean that when you walk outside, all of a sudden your body temperature is 104 degrees. No, it stays at the normal range of 98.6 if you're not sick. Even though it's 104 outside, your internal environment is 98.6. Same thing if it's cold outside. If I walk outside and it's 30 degrees, I don't turn into Frosty the Snowman. No, my body temperature is still at 98.6 degrees. And this is because of homeostasis. And more importantly, this is because homeostasis is trying to maintain these relatively constant internal conditions. And the key part with this is that it is internal. So homeostasis affects your internal organs and your internal system to maintain them at a stable state, which is like I had said with your body temperature regulation. All right, so the next one that we have on our characteristics of life, of course, is reproduction. And so reproduction is, in essence, for the purposes of what we'll say for science, is just a way that organisms swap genes or reproduce themselves in a particular way. And if you are a unicellular organism, okay, you're going to do asexual reproduction, meaning that you are going to more or less recreate yourself via cloning. So single parent organisms, they just reproduce via this asexual reproduction. I'll give you a hint, guys. If you're a human, you don't actually get to do this. So don't think one day you're going to just wake up in the morning and all of a sudden you're going to see a clone of yourself in the bed beside you. It doesn't actually work that way. We don't do asexual reproduction. Things like bacteria would. So, of course, if we have asexual reproduction, then we have to have sexual reproduction, which is for multicellular organisms like us. And sexual reproduction really just boils down to swapping of genes for parents. And the mechanics behind it we're not going to get into, but just in essence, when you think of sexual reproduction, you think of this passing of genetic information. And of course, it has to happen between a male and a female. I've never actually seen two females be able to produce a child without some sort of science intervening. So naturally, they're not able to produce a child on their own. They have to have the male and female sex cells in order to do this. So our T is going to stand for our tiniest units of life, okay, aka what I said, the cells. And so cells are pretty much the smallest unit of life that can actually still have all of the characteristics of life within it. And so cells can come in two different types, more or less. We have unicellular organisms, okay? Uni meaning one, it's a single cell. A good example of this would be like bacteria and protists, right? So they're all unicellular organisms. Their entire being is just one cell. However, if you are human, you are definitely not a single cellular organism. You are multicellular in the sense that you have many cells all throughout your body, trillions of them to be pretty precise. And these cells are really important because they all have what we call specialized functions, right? So some of you will You have cells in your body that are blood cells. You have cells in your body that are neurons or brain cells. You have cardiac cells in your heart. All of them are very specialized and they have a special job. And the reason this is so that we can actually function at the level that we do. If all of our cells had the same job, then we would just kind of be like a walking blob. It's very important that they all have these specialized functions. And finally, our last of our 7 characteristics is going to be size increase in development. So all of you know that you have definitely developed since you were a little kid or a baby. You look different, you act different, you have increased your size, and you've more or less grown. So when we say that we have grown, we have created this physiological change, okay? Or we've had physiological makeup, or more or less, for our organism, right? So all of us have developed. If you've gone through puberty, you definitely understand physiological makeup. Things are looking different. They sound different. I gave an example of a butterfly and how it metamorphosizes from a caterpillar. This would be a physiological change. So combine all together, those 7 characteristics that I've given you is what actually will characterize life as we know it.